we'll do like 5 or 6 rounds of circling, and let me just type the order in real quick. So yeah, I feel very present with that meditation. It always is very interesting. So I'm very happy for that. And just noticing everyone's face, I feel a little more in the moment, and I'm kind of excited to do this with you guys.
Hearing that, I kind of feel the bolts of excitement journeying towards me, and I'm just still lingering with the presence from the last 10 minutes or so, kind of like the world around me. Everything's very present, and I just try to savor it.
Hearing that, I feel in a kind of just non-wanting anything. I just feel very calm. I feel very cool. I feel very fresh. Both the room, the air in my room is fresh. Feels like the air inside of me is fresh.
Hearing that, I feel not quite excitement, anticipation, encouragement, connected, open, ready, alive.
Yeah, being with you guys and hearing all that, it's yeah, just really nice to be here and hear everyone's kind of positive thoughts. And I really liked when Thomas was talking about the air. Like, I immediately noticed the air in my room was also cool, and felt like the air in my lungs that I wasn't noticing before he said that. And seeing Daniel's kind of smile just again makes me happy, like I have a little brother in Austria.
Yeah, hearing that, I am appreciative of the kind of bond of fellowship that we are able to cultivate together. And I'm now drawn to like the sensations here in my heart, my chest, my abdomen. I feel a kind of freshness that is warm and nourishing. And I also share Rick's sense of aliveness that's very present now.
Hearing that, I feel the aliveness of my blood returning to my head. My head's feeling a little hot, and I feel like I'm coming back to myself a little bit, but I feel reinvigorated overall, and kind of I'm allowing my body to resettle on itself. My shoulders and my ribs and my hips and my spine, and right now I'm just stretching my toes as well.
Hearing that, I stretched my toes. Hearing all of this, I'm becoming quite aware of my body and the air in my room, and also just sort of remembering the interpenetration between my senses and the environment from the meditation, and how all of our expressions of what we're experiencing are kind of harmonic with that. and continuing it in some way. There's a kind of flow that I'm sensing.
Yeah, hearing all these kind of positive remarks, I also feel less like in my head and more just noticing the room and what we're doing. And that reminds me just how kind of short and precious life really is when we start to think about these slower thoughts and this inner penetration that we can experience with each other.
Hearing that, I want to dive deeper into the interpenetration and the here-ness, now-ness, there-ness that we are now sharing together. And yeah, there's just something very beautiful about all of this.
Hearing that, I feel quite playful, especially with language. A word that came up through the last round was neighborhood, in that each of us are different hoods bearing a shared kind of nearness, but of course doing the same thing but differently. And once again, I'm returning to kind of I feel very like tickly and prickly in my hands, and yeah, just feel once again alive.
So I don't hear you, Rick.
Don't hear me?
Oh, there you are. You just came back.
I'm sorry. Let me try without these. There was some noise in the house. Can you still hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. The headphones block some of the ambient sound. So hearing that, a kind of affordance of linguistic playfulness made me, well, invoked in me. I love the idea of a hood for neighbors. So it made me think of where we're kind of forging our way into a container, like a hood, and we're in a neighborly, friendly fellowship space. And this is really a bunch of affordances that are always potentially here, but doing this kind of like a flower opening is the feeling that I have, that you suddenly see the petals that are manifesting.
Yeah, that's delightful. My imagination is just quite awake now, and I can just appreciate Thomas's playfulness even more as kind of Rick embodied it and shared his thoughts. And yeah, I'm just fondly looking forward to practicing some more as we presence this new hood from our 4 neighbors.
Yeah, I feel this playfulness now with language of our hood, and and that, yeah, I just want to sink deeper into our hood and be playful with you.
Especially in my face, I feel like really, I suppose, just to re-invoke that interpenetration. I feel very affectionate from the inside of my face going out, but then I also feel an affection pressing on my face. So I suppose I feel that the realizing of myself, but then also being realized really just in this, like, on the inside and on the outside of my face, just like humming together.
Yes, hearing that, I realized my own energy was significantly focused inside and outside my face. And also because of Daniel's big smile before, it was contagious. And I have this smiling, happy, communion-like thing going on here, and just really enjoying being in this kind of dynamic opening.
Yeah, just savoring what you guys have been saying, that this is like a nice thing. This is a positive place, and it is kind of reassuring almost that the world can be good in such a simple way, and that just makes me glad.
Yeah, hearing that, I'm still what Tom and Rick were saying, kind of like sensation came up here, kind of like flaring up, like here, and I'm just, I feel this, I'm drawn to you, and I kind of like feel this co-realization, and I want to really be trying to realize this co-realization with you, as if we are dancing together. And it's just very beautiful and calming and soothing. And
Hearing that, I was, I suppose, feeling how my chair is holding me, and like letting it hold me as the way in which the chair can hold me, but then also wondering about the ways in which each of you are settled into your own chairs. If this wasn't just this virtual kind of, but like if everyone, like really, if we could really realize our settledness. So I'm just wondering about, yeah, the ways in which we're actually in each of our places, even though communing here.
That I was experiencing that before you even were saying it, and it was as if you were speaking from my experience.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I'll just add that every single round of this is, I love the dancing metaphor because it's feeling like that, like we're all coordinating spontaneously in a groove, and it's delicate, but it's strong. Yeah. Powerful, I rather.
Excellent. So let's go to the fellowship, and I'll just copy and paste the text steps first, just in case. And I'll paste the text in after I read it. So the first step is slow reading. So first, I like to just share why I like this text. So we're gonna read a little bit. Sorry, let me just drink some water before I cough something up. So I'm gonna read a little bit from the last writings because it's just such an interesting text, and it's actually how I kind of know Daniel and Thomas. So it's special to me because it's kind of half of my memories with them, and I always think really fondly of it as kind of this introduction to my friendship, as well as like philosophy in the East. So it just is a kind of a special text to me for that way, and it's a beautiful, amazing text. So those were why I picked it, why I feel reverence and respect for it. So I'll read, it's about 4 paragraphs, and then I'll copy and paste it. Not everyone is an artist, but to some extent, at least everyone can appreciate art. Nor is everyone a theologian, and rare is the man who experiences a religious conversion. To some degree, however, any person can understand religion. There is probably no one who does not feel a strong resonance in the depths of his heart when he reads the fervent confessions of faith of those who have gained religious faith, or the expressions of belief of the greatest religious figures. Moreover, upon falling into a condition of extreme unhappiness, there is probably no one who does not feel some religious sentiment welling up from the depths of his own soul. For religion is an event of the soul. Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul. To do so, they must experience religious sentiment in themselves to some degree. Granting that the man of religion speaks from true personal experience, I will contend that just as people who are not artists appreciate art to some extent, so too ordinary people know what is meant by religion. There is no one who will declare that he has no conscience. If there were such a person, he would in fact be engaging in a form of self-insult. There are people, however, who say they do not appreciate art. And especially in the case of religion, many insist they cannot understand it. They declare that they have no experience of a religious kind. Indeed, some philosophers even pride themselves on taking a contrary position. Religion, they say, is unscientific and illogical, or at most, something subjectively mystical. Or they contend it is not that man is created in the image of God, but rather that God has been created in the image of man. Religion, we are told, is a kind of narcotic. Now, one cannot discuss colors with a blind man or discuss sounds with a deaf man. If people say they do not understand religion at all, I cannot argue with them. However, even though I do not consider myself competent to speak about religion to others, I cannot follow those who say they do not understand religion because it is unscientific and illogical. And so I'll just copy the text into the chat.
Who's the author of that?
That's Nishida Kitaro. I'll send you the book after, Rick, if you want. Let's see. Copied it kind of twice. Okay, there's the first paragraph and the second one, and there's just two more. Okay, great. And then for the chanting part, let me just copy that. So we'll do 5 rounds of chanting, and here's 2 sentences we'll chant. So I'll start. Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. they must explain this event of the soul.
Fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Oh, your audio is not picking up again, Rick. I still don't hear you.
A little louder.
Oh, there you are.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
Philosophers cannot fabricate religion from their own thought systems. They must explain this event of the soul.
So now we'll go into precious speaking for 4 or 5 rounds. So speaking 1 or 2 sentences. I think it's so interesting that you need to experience something to be able to philosophize about it, and people can have opinions about things that they know nothing about is kind of paradoxical, and this text reminds me of that.
I'm trying to feel into the event of the soul that we call religion.
What is the or this event?
You're muted again, Rick.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
So I just have to project my voice. Okay. So I'm gonna put up my computer in the room here. This sort of explanation cannot be accurate without the experience, this event of the soul. Some things can be explained without experiencing them. This is not one of them.
And it just reminds me when he says of experiencing a conversion, how profound that could be, and how reorienting it could be to a dead philosopher. Like someone carrying all this wood, this unreligious wood, and how they might just drop it when they have this kind of experience.
The nexus of this event of the soul is opening up, and I'm reminded of Heraclitus, of the far-reaching logos of the psyche that we can never fully sojourn, so to say. So far-reaching is it.
I'm wondering about the kinship of this event for the human soul and its place in history, and to all those who, in its own way, happened to them.
Robert's image of wood, and then Daniel's Heraclitean image of fire. I thought of the wood burning, and then Thomas's query about how this religious event spreads. I thought of one candle lighting another. It's just imagery, but rich. And because of the fellowship experiencing that we're doing right now, it seems resonant with this. It's like one candle lighting the next, but even though this we're all lit now, somehow or another, the glow, the fire, something is cycling here.
Mm.
This is a religious event in a way.
Yeah, the idea when Thomas was saying it's kind of happening to people in history and it connects those people in history, and then what you're saying, Rick, is that it is a really it's a vastness, but it's a connecting vastness. It transcends my individuality and even my generic kind of concepts of the world.
Mhm. Yeah, I wonder, this event, it's kind of the most extraordinary thing, but it's also the most ordinary thing. It's kind of like both. It's turning us to that which is most obvious.
Yeah, I suppose I'm now wondering about the nature of the way in which that event is the event of a conversion of the one who it happens to, but then the way in which that one who it happens to can become the place for establishing a summoning of that no thing anywhere. So the way in which an event almost becomes a mission, in a sense, to encounter a new, just a
Can't hear me?
That was good.
Now,
Sorry, I keep forgetting. As I get calm, I get quiet. So I have to remember to project my voice. When Robert mentioned transcendent, I thought of also immanent, and this idea of logos and fire. Heraclitus's thought is that it's everywhere all the time, but we just don't see it. So in one sense, it transcends this realm that we see, but it's always here. And so the slightest little spark can create that religious event because it's as if this potential fire is everywhere. But then this, what Daniel said about ordinary and extraordinary, yes, this immense fire, but this peaceful, calm candle flame. It's almost more ordinary, and then I keep integrating everything that I hear, not just the last person, which is Thomas, but Thomas said something about a mission, and then that made me think of this through line, because I think it was Thomas who mentioned history, this through line through history, that there's this, it's almost like a teleology of awakening that moves through human history, lighting up these little candles along the way. That's the imagery that I have.
Yeah, this reminds me of like someone riding a sled towards the moon on like a big moon-filled night, um, and just happiness happening on the earth. And I also feel like it would be honoring the text that the small ordinariness that we brought up as well. Like it doesn't have to be this spectacular imagination. It's also kind of just the mundane being made more real, by the virtue of our interacting with it.
I'm still hearkening to what Rick said, kind of like with the through line of history, that this event is like a trans-temporal, trans-historical event that is through lining our souls also into the neighborhood that we were walking before.
I feel like I'm about to say exactly what you said in different language. I feel almost like, especially when I close my eyes, but not even when I close my eyes, I feel like ancestrally welcomed and ancestrally beheld in this gathering around the temple of time, where time and beings are constantly attempting their own name. It just, so, but there's this, like a, it feels so weird, but so appropriate. Like I feel gathered into a no place for a no thing. But that, like, yeah. But that ancestral kind of beholding and welcoming. And just a few minutes ago, it was like, I don't know why that makes me cry, but that could just, yeah.
I can't hear you, Rick.
I'm feeling what Thomas and Daniel said, and it's connected to what Robert said about just the mundane. And I'm still reverberating from that, all this phenomenal energy and perspective and sensitivity in an ordinary thing, like my room. And just the kind of contrast between the ordinary, conventional perspective, worldview, experience, mode of being and having and doing. And like, there's just kind of this gestating, shifting between these two perspectives going on here. And it's almost like a contradiction, but it's not. That's where I am.
So now we'll go into intentional conversation, so you can speak a little longer. Yeah, that was really powerful, Rick, and I just appreciate you putting in the effort to integrate what we were saying, and really appreciate the fellowship that we've manifest so far. And this text is just, it's so striking because it starts with just art, which everyone can relate to, but then quickly goes into something that everyone can also relate to that's more controversial. And how hard it is to grapple with the question of religion, yet how beautifully it can be done when people like Nishida think about this for their whole life and suffer. Like, it felt very joyous what we were saying, but he also in that kind of second sentence talked about how great trauma or tragedy also is a very religious part of our experience, and how vast and different religious experience can be for people.
Yeah, just in that what you just said, Robert, I feel this paradox between kind of like the the extraordinariness of that event, and then at the same time that ordinariness of that event. But it's not really a it's not really a contradiction. It's more like a harmonic contradiction. And yeah, the same thing is still going on, kind of like with what's here, what's right in front of me, like the water bottle and my glass and my notebook, and like this other dimension that we kind of like were investigating in the hesychastic prayer. This is our coming together now, and I'm just trying to be with it.
I almost just want to re-say the question of what is the nature of the disclosure of the or this kind of event that then determines and then shapes the fate of the human being to whom it happens to seize. So I think I'm feeling into the nothingness of the event, the weirdness of what time is, and once again, just the nature of the disclosure of that event, if it's in this totally otherworldly openings towards whatever you want to call that, or just these simple occurrences. And no, that's good. I'm good with that.
A lot of what I've experienced so far in this exchange is still reverberating and bouncing around in me. There's all this fragments, and sensations, and imaginal affordances and whatnot, and I'm just enjoying playing with it, and I really enjoy the feelings that are emerging in this process. Can you hear me? And some of the thoughts that are arising in connection with this moment are about, like, art is a great analogy for this issue, because well, art is more broadly than just art, beauty. This art is an attempt to capture beauty in a way. Beauty is bigger than art, and beauty can be in Daniel's cup and his, in anything that you look at, if you look at it the right way. So, but like, I feel ripe to see things beautifully because of this opening. And by analogy, religion, like, there's a spectrum of things that you may or may not notice as beautiful, more beautiful, less beautiful. Same thing with art. Some simple pieces of art, some more, masterpieces, like orchestral level, as opposed to just a nice little melody, you know. And similarly in religion. So this religious event, speaking about it as just an event, I'm thinking of, how does that generalize across the whole spectrum of religious experience? It's the same way that beauty, it's this whole thing. So there could be little moments of religiosity that are religious events in a way. And the word event kind of shrinks it to a spatiotemporal change that happened.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas it could be part of the whole structure of, everything, and maybe not notice, just like those people who don't experience art or religion. They're in the same world that we're in,
Mm-hmm.
but they're not sensing it. It's as if they had, like, what was the analogy of blind or deaf or something like that, right? So that's what I have right now. I can't hear you.
When Daniel started to talk, I got a much more expansive kind of feel in my body, and kind of just was not so in my head or in any one spot, but like it just reminded me how complex my own experiences moment for moment. And just tying that into what Thomas and Rick were saying, is it is such a it's almost like the ignorant philosopher is like in this like black and white and gray world, but there is this kind of colorful sounding like triumphant world that exists in the ordinary when we pay attention to things a certain way or appreciate things that feel or are labeled irrational or unscientific.
The word that came to my mind was theophany when I was listening to you. Kind of like the theophanic beauty of the through line of reality that connects all things and all space times with each other. And I'm just I'm drawing my water bottle, like the water on the surface is kind of like reverberating, and it's really beautiful, although it's so ordinary and so boring. But I'm kind of like drawn to that, and the kind of the mirroring and the kind of like the dynamic that's going on in my water bottle, kind of like just with the bubbles. It's just I'm just looking at all of you. Also, right, everything's dynamic, everything's through lined and beautiful. It's just what's going on now in my here in my reality, so to say.
I'm now just kind of wondering or lingering with the different ways in which we have either self-identified through history or have turned others throughout history. Like, what do we call ourselves, or what do we call others who are the people who are concerned with these kinds of events? So is what we're doing philosophical? Is what we're doing, priestly or druidry or, mindfulness? Like, it's just, I suppose I'm just like feeling back into the weird place that maybe we're in today with technology and everything else, but just like, what do we call the mindfulness of this kind of event or this kind of awareness? And in some ways it just feels so obviously and incredibly human, which is, I think, just very obvious just going around through this. But once again, I think I'm feeling into the nature of this, the kinship, the way in which it has been turned, the way in which we've, I suppose, even the mistakes maybe that we've made in relationships to these kinds of events. And maybe by way of realizing the nothingness of this kind of event, the humanness of this kind of event, and the way in which we are just these minds of time, minding time, that it's just like there's something, I suppose, appreciating difference and reconciling the singular nothingness. So but yeah, just feeling into the weirdness of today and like, what do we call a person who, I don't know, like just is almost claimed to be the safeguarder of that kind of mindfulness? It's like, do you call that a philosopher? Do you call that a safeguarder? Do you call, like, what do you, not that I'm, but just feeling into all of the words and all of the ways in which we've done it well, done it bad, what are we doing today, all that.
Yeah, everything you just said reminds me clearly of, and seems to be another way of expressing the second line in our chant, that the philosopher must explain the event of the soul. That's the task of the philosopher, to explain it. But if the philosopher hasn't experienced it, it's the first sentence, and the philosopher can't do what the philosopher is supposed to do. What that also triggers in me is like Aquinas, a brilliant philosopher, did an awful lot of explaining about maybe theoretical ways of rendering that event rational without having had experienced it. So he kind of contradicted the first sentence in a way, but maybe he wasn't exactly explaining the event, but explaining the possibility of the event and making it rational. But later on, toward the end of his life, it's claimed that he had a mystical experience and compared all of his writings to mere straw. His brilliant orchestra level philosophical explanations. And straw is like wood, harkening back to Robert's metaphor, people carrying all that wood around. And as a philosopher who's carried a lot of wood around, I can really appreciate that. But something else that you keep saying about the nothingness keeps resonating with me, and that's very connected with, you know, a simple flower has beauty in it, and you could be carrying around all of that and not see the beauty of it. And so there's this ordinary everydayness. And then you also mentioned the mistakes that we've made in relating to this. And children, I don't want to commit what Ken Wilber calls the pre-trans fallacy and say that children are enlightened. They're not, but they're not making that mistake, let's just say. They learn that mistake from this mode that the having, conquering, controlling aspect of humanity, which is part of evolutionary survival mechanisms and all that, has made more of our daily having, doing mode the norm for us. So when do children have that? Most of us lack playfulness. And so it's amazing that there's this link. We're being playful, and we're kind of opening the space for this nothingness that's everywhere.
Yeah, that was excellent, Rick. And again, I'm just so appreciative of your attentiveness to the group and your openness to share the philosophy you've experienced with other people. And I think, like the author, it's kind of dangerous to make some of these claims and say there is even a religious feeling, or that it is superior to a lot of adult productive feelings and thoughts we have. And then I forget the monk's name, but there was a monk who played with children during like his chores, and when adults would come by, he would think of talking to them about their mistakes, but then realize it was too much effort and go back to playing with the children. So there's concordance in the past with these things. And I also loved what Thomas was saying about errors and druids, and how like there's so much variety within this in the way people carry it or hold it, and how even in our errors the religious feeling can be noticed. So it is really even present in the ordinary and in the mistakes, and that's just kind of an optimistic, hopeful thought to have, that it could be so everywhere. Yeah, and just I love this text. I just can't say how much I love this text.
I'm still lingering kind of with the nearing nearness of nothingness, and how it's some right, it can be birthed in the soul, and that in itself is ineffable and inexhaustible, like far beyond what we can explicate in our in the fabricated systems of thought that we can conjure up by ourselves. And yeah, I'm just wondering about the wonder of nothingness. I've John's voice is now in my head. When oh, what is it? What is it? Thank you during the prayer. That is now present in my head.
I almost feel like, if this is even saying it appropriately, a strange kind of paradox in that I know I don't know any language well enough so as to be able to say or explain the event. But it's almost like in my not, I almost feel like if I ever get to a point where I can be possessed so fully by my own mother tongue so as to say, or just to sing the musicality of being wherever I happen to be, I feel like if I ever get to that point where I could actually explain the event of the soul, that is the only time I could actually remain in a healthy silence. So it's almost like I do all of this work, only to come to, of course, where Aquinas comes and then just be like, it's all straw. But like I feel like I need to, in some way, do 70 years of learning every single language, every single concept, just to explain one thing that happened to me 10 years ago. And then, but it's only after, I don't know, but then it's just like, it feels like I need to be a master of language so that I can just remain silent. So I'm feeling just that strange, sagely paradox of, and that breath felt really good.
Well, I totally resonate with that story of my life. My whole trajectory as a philosopher who must explain the religious event. Great choice of texts, Robert. But yes, what came to mind, I love the way that you integrated that with Aquinas. Completely resonate with this. I've been propelled by the desire to acquire the conceptual linguistic toolkit to express the inexpressible, to speak the Tao, as Lao Tzu might put it. But as he says, I think it's stanza 56. He who speaks doesn't know. He who knows doesn't speak. So yeah, the irony of devoting a life to trying to be the one who could explain something, only to the point of reaching that ability, and then being the fool on the hill in the Beatles song,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Sees the sun going down and the eyes in his head see the world spinning round and says nothing. That's a beautiful metaphor.
Mm.
And it touches on, it raised a question for me, why, if you, you know, if you really know that, why do you need to explain it? And it's like, even if you do, someone else who hasn't touched that, the words won't really help them, maybe. So it's almost like I'm questioning my own, why does this
Mhm.
matter?
Mhm.
Why does he say I must?
Mm.
I'm the philosopher who
Mhm.
must explain this.
Mhm. Mhm.
But I believe it. Paradoxically, yeah. Sorry, Robert.
No, I was just gonna say, Rick, that I feel like I've gotten to know you in the few times that we've talked, and I feel like I know you better after you just said that, because it really, I don't know, it filled in like who you are to me. I don't know, it just seemed like very earnest when you were. I almost imagine you as like a younger person wanting something, and all of that. Like they have this idea of the basho, like that basho came forward here, and your history matters, and our individuality matters. And I find the whole thing beautiful, that even if you have a great religious experience, it makes the world better, not necessarily clearer. um, and and how it can push us in these kind of different directions, and open these quests to know all the languages so that we can say the name of God in the correct tone, or something like that. And we can just go into open riffing. So if you guys want to just start speaking about the texture, anything. And I'll just say too, Rick, I'm glad that you like this text. I thought about it for a while, and I think Daniel and Thomas are people who do philosophy well, in the sense that Nishida is saying, and they've taught me so much as well as you, and it's just kind of fun for me to bring us all together. So I was excited just to do this with you guys for that reason.
I very much appreciate being invited to this group, and I resonate with you. This is fellowship, friendship. It's edifying, and it's nutrients for the soul. The more I exercise this kind of muscle, metaphorically speaking, I think the more my daily experiences are such that I can appreciate the water in Daniel's bottle, in my versions of that around me. You know, it's an Aristotelian thing. And the more you exercise anything, the more embodied, internalized, realized. So just talking about this text, which is so close to my heart already, immediately, I feel very edified, and somehow or another, I don't know what the right word is. This is this thing about language. All the words are inadequate. Validated, recognized, seen, understood, amplified. there's 45 other words that only touch on some little emotional, cognitive, affective, experiential aspect of this. And that was one of the things that kept coming up for me as we were sort of doing this. That, yeah, we're developing the language by exercising these, open, creative ways of articulating all of this stuff that are creative and new and imaginal and all of that. But all that's part of our experience all the time. But we just, because we don't have the language normally and we don't use this kind of language, we don't notice it as much. So doing this work, I think it was Thomas who said something about, or what was it, Thomas or Daniel? I don't remember, about those who are mindful of this we're doing some kind of work that's important in the through line of history, I believe, because I would imagine that as this network of ecologies of practice and practitioners that John and Nathan are developing keeps growing, the language will become more perspicacious or clearer, and we'll have what is the word? Like the coin of the realm, will be a lot of this language that we're developing.
Hallelujah.
Amen. Rick, did you read anything of the Kyoto School?
No, I just started reading, was it Religion and Nothingness?
Yeah. You might I don't know, but you might like Nishida and Tanabe and Nishitani and those fellows, because what they're also extremely logical. They try to pack in religious experience and kind of like into a logic that could explain reality.
Yeah.
And that is kind of like what their quest is all about. And they're all long-term meditators. So yeah, I would be curious what you think about those.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. John has already convinced me that I need to read that one book that I'm already reading. And this passage from Nishida that's the proof of it. And so these are people who are on both sides of those two sentences. They're philosophers who have had religious events. So, yeah. Or people who've had religious events who are philosophizing about them. I don't want to classify them as one or the other. And I think all these divisions, like art, philosophy, religion, they're artificial ways of dividing up a homogeneous reality that has these different aspects to it. And there's something that's gained by being able to describe aspects of reality, but there's something that can be easily lost by seeing them as if they're not totally interdependent.
Really lingering with a very, I guess we could even call it like a theatrical moment at the beginning of Plato's Republic, because Socrates, of course, goes down to pay service to this Thracian goddess. But it's almost like the thing that I'm seeing is like his wrist just being grabbed by like Polemarchus' slave, or I forget whose slave it is, or Thrasymachus, but there's something about that, like that being grabbed, so that grabbing of Socrates, so that he remains in the Piraeus, and then with those who do this kind of, or can endure with Socrates in doing this educational kind of thing where an image of the polis and all of these myths and all of these realizations can happen, but like that it doesn't happen unless Socrates gets grabbed by a slave, because otherwise then he just leaves, and then the knowledge of the polis is never born. The religious event is never given a form. There's no explanation whatsoever. Like if Socrates just comes down, says his prayers to himself with the one friend he goes down, and then just leaves, none of this comes out. So there's something just that moment of just that. I don't even know if Socrates considers himself, I mean, he probably considers himself a philosopher, but just that moment of that man at the beginning of that drama, just that he gets grabbed and held, and that's the only reason why, that dialogue even takes place. So just there's something about that moment between, because throughout in the beginning of this, I felt very satisfied, very satiated. I didn't want to go anywhere. I didn't want to do anything. I just felt good. But then there was that, just like, if my arm gets grabbed by someone, and there's just like this to be thrust into, not necessarily solve my problems or what do you think about this, but there's something just about that relationship, maybe between the, I don't know, power and freedom. I don't know what words to put there, but just that moment is so, like, I'm just seeing that wrist being grabbed very strongly right now.
Yeah, it's like that's something outside of yourself, right? You can't just be in your goals. There's the allopoetic as well, that this religious experience is a part of. It's not just me praying to myself. It's the world. I love at the end where they said, like, it's not that man is created in the image of God, but God has been created in the image of man. Like that narcissistic, relativistic kind of perspective people have, but it's much bigger than even Socrates, right? Like,
I suppose now just briefly I'm lingering with that. I've only read The Republic once, and it's a weird book, like all these weird books, but just he engages in all of the dialectical and educational work, but then even the dialogue itself still ends in a myth. So there's just that interesting relationship with not being able to say, but there's still the conveyance of the theatrical or the dramatic, the mythological. So just not feeling into anything too explicit, but just a kind of, just once again, the weirdness of all this.
I when I heard one of you, I forget who it was, say that you just wanted to stay in that place. Um, I had the same feeling that when we were doing the what is that called? The precious speaking. That phase was so powerful
Mhm.
that when we were going to go into speaking more, I was worried that I might lose the thread
Mhm.
because the modality shifted and it seemed to be more up here rather than in
Mhm.
here. And then that can be good, but it could also not, you could
Yeah.
feel like you losing that vibration and that connection or something. Um, and so when you talk about Socrates being grabbed on his way down to the festival, I remember the opening drama of the dialogue. Cephalus, I'm not sure if that's how you say his name, was the wealthy man, and you know, all those. It was really interesting, and I don't remember exactly where in the dialogue that it came up, but I remember Socrates saying something about how we can't be forced, or unless you try to force me, or something like that.
Mm.
So he was, I think, articulating something about being grabbed by this demand for explanation, possibly.
Mm.
Um, so I'm just kind of feeling that the richness that the Republic is, that flowered out of that grabbing. So the grabbing is this, Nishida saying the philosopher has a job.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting question.
Oh, sorry.
Interesting question.
That was my watch. Siri, I grabbed my watch and I must have banged into it, and
That's funny.
Siri thinks that was an interesting question, but I didn't
That's
ask
good.
a question, but I am inquiring. I am inquiring. I'm in an inquiring kind of curiously looking at all this rich, almost phenomenological exploration of what it's like to do philosophy, and how does that relate to this religious experience? And is it a good thing? Is it a bad thing? And that's been a struggle in me, for a long time. That, not being certain whether or not this whole attempt to be an articulator who must explain is like, I frequently just think I should stop doing that and just start meditating more and just become that sage on the hill, whose eyes and his head spin around. Because that's really, that's something. That's much more powerful than talking about it. But, that's your job. So,
Yeah.
or I guess, what would the Hindu thing would say? It's my dharma,
Mm.
in the Hindu sense, not the Buddhist sense, right? It's like my role.
Holding. Yeah.
It's my role, yeah. Like a parent's role is to parent. I'm a philosopher, so that's what I do in this life. All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to be autobiographical.
No, that was beautiful,
No,
Rick, and we
no.
appreciate that for sure.
Right, we can be autobiographical in this stage.
Well, no, and I was like, Daniel and you are both paid philosophers. Like, both of you create things that hopefully engender people to wonder about philosophy, and the personalness of this, I think, is relevant too, because it's not just some abstract thing we're talking about, even though a lot of philosophers would say it's very abstract. It's a beautiful thing, and it's a rich thing, and it's a personal thing, and even it's a decision, right? Every day is a decision to go back up on that hill and meditate, right? It's not ever kind of a fixed, static choice. Daniel, you want to say something?
Yeah, the image of the chain is very interesting. Right, for the Kyoto school philosophy, right? There needs to be a fundamental experience such that we can even say one word as, like, let's say, philosophical beings. And right, Nishida and Nishitani, they have kind of like been thrown into a certain dimension, right? In Nishitani's case, it was nihilism, and in Nishida's case, it was kind of like sorrow, right? Sorrow, sadness was his, because so many of his relatives were died before he passed away. And I think that's kind of like, we make an experience and then we are sort of say chained, and we are kind of like thrown also into a certain kind of like current into which we need to act upon. And for the Greeks, this was a liberating experience, right? In the Theaetetus, we read about the wonder as kind of like the fundamental attunement of philosophy. And yeah, for the Kyoto school guys, right? It was a more darker, a darker affair, as we know. And yeah, I'm just appreciating all that you shared, yeah, in the last 15 minutes or so about this kind of like being chained.
It's just that you said that. I'm just that enigmaticness of Socrates is so funny. Like like if, let's say, if that original countenance of the the flagrancy of a philosophical nativeness, when that happens, of course, there's this. It's almost like it's just he accepts all bindings and then liberates himself beyond them in order to reintegrate anew, to liberate beyond, to reintegrate anew. So he's just this bound to this boundlessness that he's constantly playing through. But then there's this, once again, this like scholastic relationship to what time itself is, and what this interrogation is, what this being struck is, what this wondering is. So yeah, he's constantly being bound and unbounding and committing and then going through. And yeah, it's just it becomes so enigmatically playful in its nothingness as it adopts all things and is concerned by all things. And just what a strange, truly like a stranger, like someone from beyond that comes back and comes in and goes away. And it's this, even the alienness of this kind of awareness. But yeah, the fact that he can in his, yeah, I suppose in his not being concerned with binding himself to anything but the boundlessness that is constantly granting a binding, there's just it's just that wonderfully playful mischievousness that he's constantly enacting and can't be trapped by. So there's just that constant returnership of liberation and self-enslavement for liberation, which is maybe even what learning is. Maybe that's even what all of the events of time, of the theophanic through line, that we somehow have an awareness of in order to hold to. It's just that constant flourishing for bearing, for reintegrating, for flourishing anew is just, yeah. I don't know that much about Socrates, but he's funny. That's all.
I forget where I read this, but I think I read it in more than one place that the Dalai Lama claimed that he thought that Socrates was an enlightened being.
Mm.
And that's a really powerful claim coming from a Tibetan Buddhist within a very rigidly structured system in which transformative attainments are validated within a kind of epistemological system, you know, very carefully, right? And then, like, even within the realm of other forms of Buddhism, I mean, the Dalai Lama is pretty open-minded. His entourage, I did a 3-day thing with the Dalai Lama, and he had representatives of every other form of Buddhism on the stage with him. You know, so he's very eclectic, but still there's that traditional structure. So, you know, to say that somebody who wasn't even religious in a sense that, you know, can be recognized straightforwardly within his model, that being was an enlightened being, that's a mind-blowing claim. And so, but it resonates much with what Thomas keeps saying about how cool Socrates was, and using all that kind of Buddhist language to describe Socrates. I've never heard that done before, so I was really appreciating that. And yeah, just trying to figure out, like, what kind of enlightenment did Socrates have? The character that Plato depicts, you know, part of it is Plato, but whatever he was, it's just fascinating. And Plato is conveying the idea that we all can do that,
Mhm.
and we're doing some of that. So
Yeah, I like in the dialogue, one of the dialogues, I forget the name, it starts with P, but where they like kind of ascend to heaven, and like Zeus goes, but like so do all the other gods, and it's a very open view of heaven compared to maybe the Christian view where most people don't go to heaven, in a lot of traditions, or even maybe some more like the opposite of the Dalai Lama's Buddhist view, where like a lot of Buddhists, if you don't agree with me, you're just out completely. There's no kind of middle ground for multiple belief systems within this religious framework or this philosophical framework that a lot of people have. And yeah, Socrates seems like one of the most religious people I could know. And yeah, he has a great sense of humor too. Like he's not just some stodgy priest lecturing on a lectern to you about your sins, right? He's trying to love your soul and bring you into what he's experienced.
yeah, I think in the Apology, which Plato writes about Socrates' trial, he has Socrates say that I don't know if it was there or in the Crito or the Phaedo, one of the trial and death dialogues, where Socrates is talking about the prospect of death not being problematic. Either it's like nothingness, which is fine because there's nobody there to suffer, or if there is something, the just man is fine because he gets to hang out with all the gods and the philosophers and the poets and all of that kind. So there's that kind of may a thousand flowers bloom view of heaven, or Hades or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, that's it. That's all I have right now.
No, the fourfold cure that Epicurus talks about is exactly that, right, Rick? Like you can't imagine what your death will look like, or what a lot of these fantasies that we have about you and I, the last time we talked, like spiritual people become these myths and they get these extra properties that they probably didn't possess. But then like if we buy into that, these bad philosophers like Nishida's saying, then we can get confused about even what the good is, right? Or what we should orient towards. So yeah, that was very, very beautiful, right?
Was it Epicurus who said, "Where death is, I am not. Where
Yeah,
I am, death is not." Right. So that's
exactly. Yeah.
the first disjunct in Socrates' disjunction about either there's nothing, or if there's something, I could deal with that.
And he says either God is gonna be loving or I wouldn't worship him. There's no compromise between what Epicurus says a God is. There's no vengeful God in his possibility space of what a God could be.
Yeah, I think somewhere in the Republic, Plato says that a, a god could not deceive. I remember that. I don't remember where in the Republic, but I remember when I was an undergrad, I remember writing a paper about philosophy of religion, and I remember quoting the Republic, that was a line in the Republic, that some of these ideas that you might get in some of these other cults or religions or whatever, that a human being could be God in drag or in disguise or something like that. That God is no deceiver. So
Mm.
those conceptions of God can't be correct. I forget how Plato said it, but that's similar to what you were saying, Robert, about exaggerated conceptions of a divinity or whatever.
Because those fears, they just play in our heads and they own us, right? If we have these kind of convictions that we're born with sin or incapable of being loved by God, they can just erode your confidence, right? And then if you can kind of overcome that through these kind of fellowships or through having a philosophical practice like Plato or Epicurus or Socrates had, then you can flourish, right? You can watch Rome burn and still be okay with that, right? Like you just accept life for what it is.
And yet, while we were thinking this, and I was thinking it with you, what came to my mind was things like wrathful deities in Buddhism and stuff like that. So, like, there's a place for all of these things. It depends on how you're relating to it.
Can't help but wonder then, and I don't even know how to wonder in this direction. But like, maybe just to say it with or through Socrates, just to, and whatever, let's say the nothingness, that the principle of the good is as this view offering element that both, know or known and knowability as it's constantly playing with itself. But like if he's just this kind of, in the spirit of know thyself, if he's just a constant acknowledger of what shows up and an interrogator into or an educer from, I suppose I'm wondering about, let's say, maybe the archetypal constellations of the human being, like the wrathful deities are present, the merciful deities are present, but then maybe I've been attempting to feel into, like, would Socrates still somehow understand all of that multiplicity as a grantedness of the freeness of the nothingness and the way in which it can presence itself? But it's almost like then the only thing that doesn't happen is that when, let's say, the disclosure of my agency and the arena can be one of horror, you don't have to remain in the horror. When it's one of mercy and joy and grace, you don't have to remain. So there's something about this like non-remaining, maybe this theophonic through line of time that he's constantly holding to, so he could be with whatever shows up, but it's still somehow atoned by this nothingness, which is freely granting the way in which it can be for itself. But I'm still, there's still a wondering that's like right beyond where I'm standing, which is like, I would need like a half an hour of silence just to, like, I think, broach, or if that's even the right word, the thing I want to say next. But it's something about that. If he's a constant acknowledger of the showing upness of being, I don't know, it's like he, I don't think I'm going to force it. I'm just like, I'm standing like right at my edge, I guess.
It's very interesting and a little bit funny that we have now present Socrates. he came like a guest into like where Nishida was before. the voice perspective presence of Nishida. Now there's the voice perspective presence of Socrates as well.
From Thomas's grabbing.
Yeah.
He just entered the room. And but it's this almost miraculous ability to turn our souls so they can become a locus, a site, a place for the always ongoing event of religio, of religion. This kind of like binding to reality, this self-realization of reality, the event of religion. and Socrates was just a master of turning us around so we can become participants and cultivate participatory knowing for or in that through lining that goes through all of history.
Yeah, I think Nishida and Socrates both have this kind of radical honesty that people don't really have right now, which is being able to say they're like, and you've taught me this too, Daniel, just spending time with you guys in the morning, that one of the first things I kind of picked up from you guys was just the ability to be uncomfortable and just sit uncomfortably rather than just make a statement or attach a concept to something really quickly. Like that's hard to do, but Socrates kind of looks effortless, right? Like he's always not drawn into the bullshit while he's drawing out the goodness or being pulled by the goodness. And that's like the dialectic of the multiplicity of like the tonos of the world is something that is like Thomas said, you have to sit for half an hour to say a sentence, but it's probably worth the half an hour.
Yeah, reminding the flagrancy of the good, becoming able to, right, cleaning our glasses so we can see it again.
Yeah, like that, the fact that virtue is a skill that we can develop through meditation or contemplation or fellowship is important to remember, right? It's not just you're not just lucky you get grabbed once, you have to keep putting the effort to go back down and up the cave.
But I like, right, that there's always this apparatic falling back into mystery and obscurity, and I don't know what's going on. What is this all about? And I like that Thomas was exemplifying it right before.
I'm all of a sudden really curious about Socrates more than I ever was, because I've always accepted that he was a kind of enlightened being, and he's a really good teacher who never teaches because he's always asking questions. And that's his method of awakening people. Like he describes it in the Apology that he's a gadfly and a midwife. That's how he awakens the daemon in others, so to speak, turning them in the way Daniel said. But I wonder, how did he get there? This is that we
I think solar rays from the sun were happening around 600 BC, and like him and the Buddha and Lao Tzu were all just being brought up. Yeah, I think there was a whole qualitative leap or something.
It's almost impossible to not infer something like that through some kind of abductive reasoning. You know, like the way North and South America align with Africa. You know, you see a pattern and there must be an explanation, you know. I've always thought that about the axial age, but you know, like, well, we get an account from the Buddha about how he got there, but we don't get an account from Socrates about how he got there. And there's just a little bit of fragments about his one wisdom teacher who, unlike all the philosophers that he critiques, he never had an unkind critique of, which is Diotima. And she was like the leader of some kind of mystery cult or something like that, you know, which is a kind of Gnostic or, you know, whatever, Orphic. Maybe they were Orphic, you know, I don't know. But I'm fascinated by Socrates more today than I've ever been before, just because we're really, you know, we're bringing him into this space with us.
Yeah, this dinner speech of Diotima is awesome, right? Like it's all about beauty and awe and the plurality, but the oneness within it, the through line, and it really challenges a lot of our kind of notions of beauty and things like that. It's in Plotinus text that I read a lot, and the spontaneity of Socrates and the joviality. Like he's such a weird religious figure, or even a weird philosopher. Like I think there was less of a separation then than there would be today. So yeah, but he was through his attention and his knowledge, he was able to like experience his sensuality without being pulled down by it or drawn away from his goodness by it. And yeah, it's almost perplexing how Plato could paint that for people in those dialogues without getting it kind of wrong.
Yeah, one of the curious things about Socrates, I don't know if this is true, but I remember reading this in more than one place, was that he could drink people under the table and he could stand in a trance for like a day or something.
Hmm.
He was gone. He was somewhere else.
Yeah, no leg cramps, no problems, just like doing
Like
some kind of.
standing version of samadhi.
Hmm. Yeah, and if you read his battle journals, like Xenophon describes him in battle, he's this wily man that looks like a terrifying gargoyle or something to the opposing army. They just like they avoid him within the thick of battle. Like how you can have even a thought in the thick of battle, but they were like, no, I'm not messing with that guy without even knowing who he was, just by his kind of presence.
Yeah, yeah. He was probably an oracular medium for one of those wrathful deities in that moment.
That's a nice way to put it. That's a very nice way to put
A thousand arms of
it. Yeah. Yeah.
It's funny, from Nishida to Socrates.
Yeah.
Thanks to Thomas.
Sorry.
Well, this is really good. Do you guys want to go into like the last step and just voice a takeaway, and then we'll just end the meeting as four philosophers going back to our neighborhood?
Sure.
Does anyone feel like going first?
I don't mind going first. I'm taking away a lot from this.
Hmm.
Maybe the most powerfully felt thing that I'm taking away is the joy of this friendship, that this fellowship friendship. I'm just so happy that I did this with you guys, and I hope we do it more often. Um, I'll plug that I remember in the video that you suggested that I watch from John, I think, to
Mm.
prep for this. He
Mhm.
says it should be done at least 4 times with the same 4 people, 4 by 4. So you guys, you owe me another 3 now. Just
No, Rick, I mean, I remember about the first time you talked with John that you mentioned you wanted to do this fellowship. And like my life has been transformed by our friends Seth and Zeb and Daniel and Thomas, who you're meeting here. Like it really, I mean, I've always had great friends and a pretty good life, but like the difference between just being with people like that, like you can just see in Thomas, right? He just embraces the weird and the strange. And there's a freedom in that that just you don't have elsewhere. And it allows you to like become such a better person by just doing that. Yeah, I 100% agree with what you're saying, Rick. And it is like a just a blessing that I hope I don't take for granted, these things. Even yesterday we did one of these and it was amazing with someone like you who had never done it before or had only kind of done it once. And he was saying kind of the same things you're saying, Rick. He was just like, oh, doing philosophy with people, it's great. Like I didn't know philosophy could be this. And I was like, this is philosophy. Yeah, this is kind of it.
yeah, this is Philia Sophia. I do Philia Nikia with my academic peers, and I'm sure Daniel does every now and then, and it's not the same. That's different. That's debating, arguing, and there's a place for that, and I enjoy doing that. Just like, you could be like, let's just say, a Tai Chi player like John, where you enjoy doing, the practice for the deeper benefit of it, but you also enjoy sparring.
Mhm.
Yeah, the Lenkos, right, is a kind of sparring, and Plato was a wrestler.
Yeah.
I would even welcome this element of let's say playful, right? Playful wrestling more often.
Yeah. When I did martial arts, I used to love the sparring.
They have sticky hands. I would love to. Have you guys ever heard of that? It's like a Tai Chi where you just go kind of touch someone and you just do this pushing, and it's almost like you're doing Tai Chi with another person, the way you can do it with like the wind or with like the universe. And it's like it sounds very forceful because like some of the people that are really good at Evan Thompson, actually, I'll send you a video, Rick, where Evan Thompson does a documentary or something on someone doing sticky hands, and it's just fascinating. It's so weird that just by touching someone, you can both be yourself and like connect to the world. Um,
That sounds interesting. I'd love to see that. Is that
yeah,
different from push hands, which is a Tai Chi thing?
no, it's the same thing.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
yes,
Oh,
yes.
okay. Yeah, because I did Tai Chi for a while, and I used to love the push hands.
Oh yeah,
It was almost like a Ouija board, where the other person
yeah,
is
yeah, yeah.
the board for you, and you're the Ouija board for them.
Yeah.
That was really awesome. Yeah, feeling their intention.
Right. It's intimate.
Yeah, it's almost psychic, feeling their intention before they move to move, that kind of thing.
Like Psyche or Fusus or
Yeah, yeah, good connection.
Thomas or Daniel. Do you guys want to share anything before we wrap up?
I'll say quick. I'm wherever I found myself 15 minutes ago. There's like I'm gonna hold on to some of the things that opened up, and I suppose I'm just enjoying that opening up. And yeah, I maybe just to not say too much is we should do this and the dialectic into dialogos soon.
That would be nice.
Yeah, I can only echo what you already said before. Was really, really, really good. And also the passage you picked, Rob, was really excellent.
Yeah, one of the things I will take was Thomas's saying what he
Summons Nishida.
said. Thank you. Great picture. I'm going to screenshot that.
Oh, good. Oh, sorry. I'll send you that exact
Oh,
photo.
that's okay. Yeah. I know that thing that Thomas said about acquiring all the language and then being silent. I'm taking that with me. Thank
I
you.
actually forgot I said that. Thank you for saying that. I totally forgot. Yeah.
I'll at least upload this privately and then just share the video with all of you. So if you wanted to like rewatch any of the things we said. Great. So I'm going to just hit the end button, and yeah, I love you guys, and I'm so glad we're friends, and we'll definitely try to coordinate this again soon, Rick, whenever you have time and everyone has time.
Ricky, we can't hear you.
Oh, sorry. I was going through it. Yeah, I don't know what's going on with my computer. Maybe it's the acoustics in this room is too big. Maybe I need to be in my smaller room. I have a smaller space where the acoustics are better, but I don't always have sole access to that space in my house because of others. But yeah, this was great. I really feel connected with you guys. Thank you. Great to meet you and share with you.
Thank
Bye,
you.
guys.
Bye bye.